Welcome to the Capital News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Thursday, January 7th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. Title of today's podcast, Jobless Train Continues, Market Higher. So market performance, initial claims, Federal Reserve's balance sheet, money supply, our typical Thursday discussion. But of course, with yesterday's fiasco and circus coming to town, in yesterday's podcast, a sad day for America. It was sad to me. Maybe it wasn't sad to you. I think that was a pretty low day in American history. Some people, of course, wanted more violence. Even some people who listen to this podcast think that it should have been more violent. Again, as I stated yesterday, I think there are 1,000,001 reasons to put our politicians and our government on notice that we don't like their actions, their behavior, what they have done to us, to our country, and what they continue to do. But yesterday was a complete political agenda. You have to understand history. You have to understand some people, some figures in history who lived through these types of events and gave us some wisdom, such as President Abraham Lincoln, telling us that a house divided cannot stand. Well, if you march on Washington, D.C. on a purely political agenda, motivation, a partisan issue, well, that's not uniting the country. That is further division. When you march on Washington, D.C. and breach the Capitol because you're upset that your candidate for president lost, and he's been telling you for months that if I win, everything's perfectly fine, it's legitimate, but if I lose, it was a fraud, it was rigged, it was illegitimate. Extremely dangerous rhetoric, which led to yesterday's events. This is not rocket science. This is easy to connect these dots. A woman was shot and killed for no reason whatsoever. This woman should not be dead. Other people should not be injured. And of course, there were a couple other people who died as well due to medical emergencies. Completely avoidable. This did not have to happen. And now the president today coming out with a video presentation, a couple 2-3 minute speech statement today, basically threw all of his people under the bus. It was a 180 as to what he has been saying for months. Where was this tone? Where was this rhetoric, Mr. President, months ago? And I don't mean after the election, I mean before the election. Where was this tone in attempting to unite the country? Where was this tone in just stating outright that no matter the results, there is going to be a peaceful transition of power? If he loses, of course, it's going to be peaceful. That is a hallmark of our country, a peaceful transition of power. George Washington showed us the way. John Adams immediately continued that. That's how it's supposed to be. And when the president didn't commit to a peaceful transfer of power months ago prior to the election, and obviously has continued with that up until today, what do you expect? That's a no-brainer. Of course there's going to be a peaceful transition of power should I lose the election. Because that's what we do in the United States of America. I understand these people's frustration. 100%. I talk about this stuff every single day. But you have legitimate grievances to march on Washington, to write your congressmen and senators, and to put them on notice that this is not going to be tolerated anymore. That these things are not going to be done in my name with my hard-earned tax-paying dollars anymore. And you're not going to get around it with the printing press. Not going to happen. That is something that can unite the country. Right now, the country is divided. There are no Democrats and a ton of independents and even a lot of Republicans who support what took place yesterday. That's going to cause further division. And now the interesting question, and I mean, for those who are, really, really on the Trump train, do they understand that the president threw them under the bus today? For months, he has been saying, march on Washington, be strong, fight, fight, fight. I mean, this is basically, in these people's minds, this is their last stand. This is remember the Alamo type stuff. This is it. Congress is convening to count the Electoral College votes to certify them. We have to stop this. We have to overthrow this because we want our guy to win, to remain the president of the United States. This wasn't your typical protest or rally. This was it. This was their last chance. Is it really that big of a stretch of the imagination that what unfolded yesterday actually happened in this country? I don't think it's that big of a stretch of the imagination. I think this was completely foreseeable. You have other members of Congress out there rallying these people, basically telling them to storm the building. You have Rudy Giuliani saying this is trial by combat. This man is a lawyer, for God's sake. He is an officer of the court. Trial by combat? You think this is the Game of Thrones? What does that mean? How are some people going to interpret that? They're probably already excited and hyped up to be there. They're frustrated. They're upset because deep in their minds, they believe that the election was rigged, that it was stolen from them, that they are deplorable, that they are looked down upon. Well, this is a trial by combat. What's combat? Is that sitting down for tea? No, it's not. And of course, Rudy isn't going to step into the ring. But as far as he's concerned, have at it. So the president is trying to tone it down. Anybody who did anything unlawful needs to be held to account, which of course is correct. But that's not how he made it seem for these past couple of months, that this was it. They stole it from us, so what else are you going to do? Ask please, say thank you. No. Come on. So he's concerned, and rightly so. From a legal standpoint, did he incite a riot? Those questions will be asked. Some prosecutors, I'm sure, will look into it. Whether anything comes of it's another question entirely. But the president's concerns. But what are these true Trump loyalists? Do they understand that he threw them under the bus? And that's because this guy just cares about himself. He's probably concerned about some of these legal ramifications now that might happen as a direct result of his rhetoric. Hundreds of millions of dollars raised for his quote-unquote legal fund. Where'd all that money go? Is that all accounted for? I bet it isn't. A billionaire needed to raise a whole bunch of money from a bunch of people who believe in him, every word he says. What a shame that was. What a con job that was. He's all about Donald Trump. Threw you under the bus. Shouldn't have happened. Well, you use that type of rhetoric, what do you think is going to happen? Words matter. And now, finally people are starting to maybe see it. Words matter, and especially words from a president of the United States, the most powerful person on the planet. Who would have thunk it? So what comes next? Of course, you had Chuck Schumer and Crazy Nancy calling for the 25th Amendment to be invoked, or if that doesn't happen, for a quick vote in Congress for another round of impeachment. This is just politics for the most part, but maybe they're just trying to box the president in, try to sort of say, okay, look, you want any type of legacy, or do you want to be impeached twice? Do you want to get kicked out, that type of stuff? Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. 2 weeks left to go, 12 days left to go until Inauguration Day. Anything can happen within those 12 days. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully the president maintains his composure here, tries to continue with these types of videos of calming everything down. Of course, a lot of people are going to say too little, too late, but it's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. Try to unite the country. I mean, he should have done this months ago before the election. You could have easily have beaten Joe Biden. You could have easily have beaten him off of policy discussions and a true debate, as opposed to the S show that we saw in that first debate and everything subsequently thereafter. He could have done it. He's his own worst enemy. Those are self-inflicted wounds. But he can't help himself. And this is what he said. And when people say these types of things, they cannot be trusted, they cannot be respected, and they should not receive your vote. But we're past that point now. He's already received 74 million of them. So it's going to be an interesting question as to where we go from here as a country. What type of power will Donald Trump have once he is out of office? As I stated a couple months ago, he may prove more powerful, assuming certain states' attorneys general don't get him. If he remains out of jail, he could lead a movement of some kind. I mean, we know the guy loves money. We know he loves power, and we know he loves attention. So he's going to be losing some of that presidential power, obviously, but he could still pick it up with power from the people if he wants to really push that type of movement. And of course, that will continue to give him attention. So will he just quietly go back to Mar-a-Lago and play golf and enjoy his family and his grandchildren? I hope so. But that's probably not going to be the end of it. So we'll see. Anything can happen in these last 12 days, I guess, with what comes out of the president's mouth. But let's hope that it's peaceful. Let's hope it's a return to being able to have conversations with each other. There are families that don't speak to each other anymore. There are friends that don't speak to each other anymore because they support Trump or they're anti-Trump and they just can't communicate anymore. That is extremely unhealthy to our country, to our society, to our politics. And with all of these other social media platforms starting up, becoming established, for the left wing and for the right wing, all this is going to cause further division. Because it's just going to be an echo chamber. The same pundits, the same analysts, the same articles, the same videos. You're never going to hear from the other side, and you're never going to want to. So this is going to become extremely dangerous, and I do think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I hope I'm wrong in that. But a lot of this falls at the feet of the president. And I wish he would have done what I had suggested yesterday. He still has time to do so and take responsibility for these things, but it's not likely. He's just going to throw his people under the bus. Well, I didn't mean for that to happen. You did something wrong. You're going to be held to account. You're going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, etc., etc., etc. It's not how you made it seem, Mr. President. So market performance, dollar index gaining a little bit here today, trading at 89.85. Broad weakness against some of those other currency pairs, again, with the dollar strengthening. Bitcoin is currently trading at 38,360 points per coin. Overnight futures trading, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 0.6%, as is the same for the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ 100 is up 0.5%. These markets hitting an all-time high today. Japanese markets are up 2.5%, hitting a 30-year high, trading at 28,172 points on the Nikkei. A sea of green across the pond in Europe, and the Australian cash trade gained 0.5%. On the share price front, we have Apple gaining 3.5% for the day. Tesla up another 8 percentage points, trading at $816 a share. We'll come back to that momentarily. Microsoft gaining 2.9%, Amazon gaining 0.75%, Facebook gaining 2%, and of course another up day for some of the big financials. JP Morgan gaining another 3.3%, and Goldman Sachs gaining 2.1%. So Tesla now, according to some calculations, Elon Musk, the founder and CEO of Tesla, may be the richest man in the world. I don't want to say that he is the wealthiest man in the world because I think this is built on a bubble. So I am going to use the word richest. Now, the very interesting thing is Jeff Bezos used to have that title, or he still might, a very close race, right? But it's basically Tesla versus Amazon. So you have Amazon, a company that sells everything to everybody and delivers an untold of amount of product to an untold number of people on a daily basis, and has a cloud service, Amazon Web Services, with their clients being the largest corporations on the planet, having multi-million, if not multi-billion-dollar contracts with the U.S. government. And here with Tesla, we have a car company that didn't even sell 500,000 vehicles yesterday, and that guy is richer than the guy that sells everything to everybody. Figure that one out. And Tesla only shows profits on paper because of some buddy-buddy deals that they have conjured up with the government for tax credits and carbon offsets and all this other BS. Okay? Very interesting. I think Tesla will be under $100 a share probably within a couple years. That's what I'm saying. It's a complete bubble. Look at it. Look at a graph. Look at a chart. It's completely unsustainable. It is completely ridiculous. It is one of the poster children of this everything bubble. But that doesn't mean it can't go higher. It most definitely can. But it's trading like a penny stock. It's up another 8% based off of what? Drives me crazy, as you can probably tell. It's just out of control. But this is what happens in a bubble environment. WTI is trading at $51.30 a barrel, Brent at $54.85, natural gas $2.70. Gold and silver are both in the red right now. Gold is at $1,909 an ounce. Silver is at $27.04 an ounce. Those are spot prices. So oil continues its march higher, exactly what we do not need, with tens of millions of people unemployed and underemployed, but there you have it. And to round it out, Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note is yielding 1.09%, so it also continues its march higher as well. So, obviously, the title of today's podcast, Jobless Train Continues, Markets Higher. The markets are completely numb anymore to these figures from the Department of Labor. These are initial claims today. Of course, tomorrow is the first Friday of the month, so we will get the official jobs report. Expectations and predictions are all over the place. So the economists just have their heads spinning. They have no idea what's going to happen. Don't say I blame them when you have so much distortionary effects underway. It's going to be hard to gauge where that number's coming from. But for the past several weeks, we have been around 800,000 per week. So we'll see what BS number they give us tomorrow. But here, initial jobless claims for the week ending January 2nd, 787,000. So nearly, again, another 800,000 Americans filing initial claims, and the markets grind higher to all-time highs. They're numb to this reality. They are numb to tens of millions going to food banks, awaiting evictions, etc., etc. This is disgusting as far as I'm concerned. This is a disgrace. And of course, the prior week, December 26th, was revised higher by 3,000. It now sits at 790,000. Okay, that's seasonally adjusted figures. Continuing claims, which lags 1 week, so this will be for the week ending December 26th, came in at 5,072,000, a decrease from the prior week of 126,000. So that continues in a direction, a positive direction, but it's distorted because of all of the Nobody Cares Act policies and everything else that we have been talking about here since the implementation of the Nobody Cares Act, which is going on a year already. So when you add them all up, regular state, federal employees, newly discharged veterans, pandemic unemployment assistance, the PEUC, extended benefits, additional benefits, and a work share, we get a grand total of 19,200,000. Of course, I'm rounding there. That is a decrease from the prior week of 419,000. So again, in the right direction. This is for the week ending December 19th. This lags 2 weeks. The biggest decreases came from regular state unemployment benefits. 188,000 decline week over week. PUA was down 70,000. The PEUC was down 293,000, and the largest gain was in extended benefits, week over week gaining 148,000, which to my recollection, is one of the largest week-over-week gains for extended benefits in quite a while. So once your regular state benefits expire, some people may be able to qualify for extended benefits. Of course, the PUA and the PEUC are also there for similar purposes and to provide assistance for those who typically would not qualify for traditional state benefits. Now, of course, those policies, those programs, I should say, were set to expire. Of course, with the Nobody Cares Act 2.0, they have been extended for another 10, 11 weeks until the end of March, so basically the end of the first quarter of this year. What's going to happen after that is anybody's guess, but chances are, because there is no production, there's just money printing going on for the most part, they're going to have to do it again. So 3.0, 4.0 of Nobody Cares Act will be coming to a theater near you in the not-too-distant future. At 19.2 million, that's still going to put us near 13% on a unemployment rate, high 12s, low 13 percentage rate there. Again, highly distortionary. Par for the course. I've been saying, I'm a broken record. I know this, but that's what I have to be because Fox News is a broken record 24/7. CNN's a broken record. MSNBC is a broken record 24/7. I'm on here for 30 minutes a day. I have to do it. I have to drill this stuff into your heads so you understand what's going on here. Because they don't give it to you like this. They just continue to spew the nonsense that there's a miraculous recovery because Wall Street's making all-time highs. I guess everything is right in the world. It isn't. But that's what they keep doing. The worse the information, the worse the data, the higher stocks go. We're hitting all-time highs all over the place. The Nikkei is back to 30-year highs. South Korean markets hitting all-time highs. New Zealand markets hitting all-time highs. Australian markets, I think, flirting it once again with all-time highs. The Indian exchanges hitting all-time highs, etc., etc., etc. Getting back to it. Not because of growth. There's still lockdowns. There are still restrictions. Yes, there are some people working. Yes, there is, of course, still some production out there. But that's what you need. You need production. There needs to be something created in order for something to be taxed. That's what grows the economy. Production does. Not the printing of fiat currencies and just putting fiat currencies into somebody's account and saying, well, that's enough. That's economic growth. If that was economic growth, we would never have a recession. We would never have a problem. But that's not how it works. And we're going to find out very shortly, we already are in the midst of it, as to how destructive these policies have been and are going to continue to be. And they ain't done. Because I imagine one of the first orders of business after Inauguration Day is increasing those $600 checks to $2,000. Maybe even more. And God knows else what they're going to come up with. Might sound good on paper, but it just does not work. There is no free lunch. Money does not grow on trees. Wake up, people. It's not that difficult. And then just to round it out, our typical discussion, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet stands at $7,334 billion, a slight decrease from a week ago. So still continuing that slight downtrend that we have seen. Same is the case for M1 and M2 money stock. So there you have it. All of these numbers will continue to climb higher. The U.S. debt is at $27.7, almost $27.8 trillion. We know what's coming down the pike. We know this is likely going to hit $30 trillion by the end of this year. It'll probably be higher than that. With that being the case, we know the Federal Reserve's balance sheet is likely to hit $10 trillion. It very well may be higher than that, especially if there is some sort of market force that brings these exchanges, that brings the Dow, the S&P back to some semblance of reality. Well, then there's going to be a panic in Washington, D.C., at the Federal Reserve, in Congress, and of course in Wall Street, and they'll pump even more. So at a minimum, $30 trillion national debt by the end of this year, a balance sheet at $10 trillion. That's 50% of GDP. 50% of GDP, $10 trillion. Don't forget, during the great financial crisis right before it, it wasn't even at $1 trillion. Okay, this is a complete takeover. And they're doing it by printing money out of thin air, and we have to pay all the consequences. You want to march on Washington? There you go. There you go. So the jobless train continues, markets higher, and of course the circus continues in Washington, D.C. Let us pray for peace. Let us pray that the temperature and the volume in this country comes down a couple notches, that it is a peaceful transfer of power on January 20th, and that there is some sanity restored to Congress. A lot of that ain't going to happen, but we can hope. So there you have it. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. Tomorrow, we'll go through the jobs report. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.